So, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Growing Up Conscious Show. I'm excited for our interview today. And so, I'm your host, Kathleen Connor. And after raising my own two sons and working for more than 25 years, mostly in public schools as a special education teacher, and also doing a lot of different things on the side with like consciousness, awareness, energetic body work, I chose to create this podcast for people ages 2 to 202 that are engaged in creating a joyful life, a conscious life, an aware life, and those that want to continue expanding how they look at life and like continuing to evolve. Let's put it that way. And along those lines, I chose my next interview based on my part of my own evolution, and that is learning more about human design. Now, when I say learning, I mean just about my own chart, because how I um, how I became involved with Krystal, the person I'm interviewing today, is that couple years back, probably 3 years back now, my friend Leanne was interested in human design. So she's like, give me your birth date information. I'm going to find out what you are. And human design, like a lot of systems, gives you a name and numbers and that kind of thing to go to correlate with your birthday and some other things, which Crystal can tell you about. And so she pulled it up and she said, you're a reflector. She goes, that's only about 1% of the population. And I'm like, great, what does that mean? So I looked into it a little, but human design is something that really, other than your own chart, if you really want to be able to support other people with it, you have to do the deep dive. And so I just recently, for my own sake, hired Krystal to tell me more about my specific chart in regards to being a reflector and being a 6-2. Both Krystal and I are 6-2s in our human design chart. And that gave me, I'm only about halfway through my 90-page report on that, but it's part of what Krystal does is self reclamation work for people after changes. But just hearing about my chart, I'm not big on saying, hey, I'm an Aquarius and that means this, or hey, or this is what I am on the Enneagram. I'm not big on being like defined in any particular way, honestly. Maybe that's part of being an Aquarius. But I was really curious how this piece with Reflector impacted my life and my relationships and my dynamics when I'm in groups like at work or other places. So since I had already met Krystal through studying Anelia Benz's work, we both were looking at Anelia Benz's tools, and I met her in that community, and I found out that she had done a lot of the work with studying human design, and she's put her own kind of unique piece into that, and she can explain that. And I already trusted Krystal. I'm like, okay, she's the one I want to ask. Like, what is it to be a reflector, and what can you tell me about this? But then when I was getting my session done, I found out because she has 5 children that once she studied human design, she started looking at the implications of knowing your own kids' human design charts. And so that's why I was excited for the interview today. I'd be excited to interview Krystal anyway because she's a life coach in many areas. But in this area of being a parent of 5 children and also understanding human design, I was really curious to bring her on and find out more about this. So today I'm interviewing Krystal Trammell. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. It's funny because as a teacher, I'm always like double M's. That means a short A, so it's Trammell. But often I can be wrong with names, so I should have asked you. But you you got to study human design in a unique way because of the work that you'd already done and being a parent. So if you can tell us a little bit about how you first discovered human design and then how you use it with your kids. We could start there.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that lovely intro. Um, yeah, so human design found me about 10 years ago now. And so my prior background is in birth work. I've always been self-employed. I had children young. I have 5 children, actually. I have a grandchild as well. And that's a whole nother big journey of supporting your adult sovereign children in their life path. Um, but so being self-employed and having 5 children, um, I've had a lot of trying to figure out how to find success in the world. And I found human design because I posted in a business group about 10 years ago, and it was like a vent. It was just I've been doing this and trying these things and learning these things, and just nothing's working. And I'm just so bitter. And bitter is a very, it's a key word in human design that has to do with projectors. And so someone in the comments reached out to me and they were like, have you ever heard of this thing called human design? I feel called to give you a reading. I feel like you're a projector and maybe this will help you to have some perspective in what you're going through. And this person ran my chart. I am indeed a projector. And I have 2 centers defined, which we'll get into that later. But I have a lot of openness in my chart, and she told me a little bit about what it all means and how it fits together, and I was just kind of irked. I was not happy with it at first. I was like, that sounds not so fun and variable and wait for the invitation and I don't know. But it stuck with
So
me.
you resisted it. At first, you resisted it, huh?
Oh yeah, I was mad. I was like, I'm supposed to be some other type, the one that does better and makes more money. And so, but it stuck with me because I kept coming back to it again and again. And and of course, as somebody with who's committed to parenting, I guess I grew up kind of. I had a very intense upbringing. I had older parents. I'm the only child of only so my parents were very focused on me for better or worse, sometimes worse.
Yeah.
And so having my own children, I really, really wanted to get it right. I wanted to do everything as best as possible. I wanted to help them with, I knew I wanted to homeschool before I had kids because I didn't want to put my kids through the things that I felt like were inevitable at the time. And so I really wanted to know my kids and support my kids and who they were. So of course I looked up all their charts. And so I found out that my oldest child is a projector like me. And then I have a generator, a mani-gen, another generator, and a reflector. And so that was part of, I found out my youngest child was a reflector when he was 4. He is now 14, almost 14. And his birthday's in a little bit. And it's been really, really helpful because even at age 4, I could tell that my youngest one there's something about him that was just a little bit different than the siblings. And I knew also my oldest, there was something a little bit different. And having the details of human design, one of the things about projectors is we're good at mastering systems. I just so happen to have been called to master the system of human design. And so it really gave me a lot of motivation to learn more about all the types, especially so that I could support my youngest child in being that unique 1% of the population.
Well, question about that. So at first you resisted what
Mhm.
your chart was. And like I said, I really don't like getting labels and being told that I'm supposed to be this or that.
Me either.
But I was really curious. I was really curious about the reflector, especially because of things I was seeing in my life and noticing. And so what had you go like, wow, this is really, I mean, there's probably people listening that have never heard of human design, right? So
Sure.
what had you go more in depth with it, even though you originally resisted it?
Something about it just captivated me. It is a synthesis of 5, perhaps more different systems. Human design is a channeled system, meaning it just kind of came into the world via like a channeling.
Yes.
Um, And so it's a synthesis of things like the Hindu chakra system, the I Ching, which is Chinese divination system, and the Kabbalah. There's pieces of it that you wouldn't think fit together, but they do. And including the human genome, the 64 gene key. You'll see I've got my other systems in the back here. I've got gene keys, I've got astrology, I've got other human design things on my walls. And so I was captivated by the system kept having more and more and more details and it's almost like the double slit experiment when the fact that you're looking, more information is revealed, right? So like the particle and the wave, right? Where looking at it reveals more information or changes the information. And so it
Mm.
just seemed like every time I read something, even opening a book at a random place, there was something there that was powerful and spoke to me. And I was like, all right, I just keep coming back to this. I'll have to dig into it. And it's funny because I didn't actually um, pursue certification in human design until last year. I was I've always been
Studying it
studying
for
on
many
my
years.
own.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so what are the main, before we get into your kids and the benefit of knowing for your kids, what are some of the main ways, like I know for myself, some things you told me, even though I'm not done reading my report, some things that I read about and some things that you told me about in more depth, um, fit with how I am and helps me kind of have more peace about certain things about myself. And then other things like when you're saying, well, a reflector really should be kind of following the lunar cycle and checking out how it's different every day of the month. I'm like, like do I have time for that? Do I want to? So it's really a choice like anything else, but it makes if I did that, it would make me kind of more self-reflect on what actually is going on instead of just guessing like we were talking about before we came on like in the middle of the night last night I like popped awake at like 1 a.m. like bing like full of all this energy and I'm just like what is this and it could be related to the moon and my all the things that are different about me because of when I was born all of that and without making any of it significant but just using what you can in a practical way. What are some of the practical ways that you have found knowing your human design has been helpful to you before we get into your kids?
Sure. And that's a really good question. Or just reframe that, yeah, if it's not practical, it's just a lot of mind candy, right? And
Right.
I am a fan of can this be used in practical ways? For me, I guess, so in human design, your chart will be varying levels of open depending on what things you have defined. Reflectors have all these centers open, and then projectors have also sometimes a lot of open centers. I do, not everyone does. But regardless, I guess learning about my design gave me this baseline of permission and self-acceptance to go, oh, this way that I am isn't a deficiency. It's not a flaw. It's not that I'm dysfunctional somehow. It's that this is part of my innate design and I can accept it and find the high frequency reframe around that rather than feeling like it's a deficiency or a problem or something to feel ashamed about. And so just that piece of like radical self-acceptance of who we are is re has been very healing for me. Um, and especially for someone with a lot of openness in their charts, this can really be very impactful because it's like giving them permission to be their flexible, mutable, changeable self. And not everybody is, I think we always think what we're supposed to be like what we're not. And human design gives us this
Yes.
permission.
The way that I've studied a lot with access consciousness, right? And they would say often what you think is your wrongness is actually your strongness.
Oh, that's a
So
great way
I'm
to put it.
thinking about when I was teaching in public schools and with this huge system in like the bigger elementary schools where we'd have like three grade levels of each grade. So it was a bigger system and all the rules and systems around that. And I would hear the other teachers talk about what wasn't working and what we could change to make it better. But then when we get to a staff meeting, hardly any of those teachers would speak up. And then I ended up being the mouthpiece, and then often ended up getting in trouble. And I'd be like, why do I feel like I have to speak up about these things, right? But to some degree, it has a little bit to do with being a reflector, right? Because I'm aware of like how systems work and how they don't work. And I, you know, it's probably part of the Aquarius thing too. It's like I always have these possibilities of how they could work so much better, and a little bit too much of an idealistic viewpoint, like utopian viewpoint on the world. So instead of making myself wrong about like why am I the one that speaks up and gets in trouble? Other people just keep their mouths shut and they just put their head down and do whatever they're supposed to do. And so knowing the reflector part was helpful in regards to that. It's not necessarily, I mean, it doesn't mean I need to speak up in situations where I'm going to get in trouble, but it does mean that, yes, I am probably aware of where the system's working and where it's not working, and then choose about whether it makes a difference or not to speak up, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and ideally, a reflector is meant to be this central hub of a group, and like you're meant to be kind of the go-to or the expression of the group dynamic as a whole. And so it makes sense that you'd be the one speaking up, but unfortunately, it wasn't always well received.
Yeah.
But you knew that that was the frequency that those people were thinking, even if they didn't say it. So.
Right. Yeah. So it's that aspect of some definitions, like I was telling you when you were explaining the reflector one to me, that after watching one or two episodes of the series called Sex, Love, Goop, something like that, Sex, Love, and Goop, where they had
Uh,
different sex therapists. There's this one woman that came up with a system called Erotic Blueprint, where she
mm,
asks you questions and you find out more about what works for you in terms of intimacy. And even though I only just did the free quick quiz, it gave me this like aha moments about that. And it overlaps with my reflector part. Like my environment really matters for me. Um, and and that shows up too when in intimacy. Like if I'm looking to be intimate with somebody, but there's really loud noise outside, or like when I was married and the baby's crying or whatever, if there's something that's distracting me, then it's really hard for me to put my focus on just being intimate with that person at that time, right? And that also fits with the reflector, and it fits with a lot of mothers because we, as women, we tend to be like aware of our environments more that way too. But so for
yes,
you, you found practical ways in your life that it really made sense for you.
definitely. Well, so the piece about one of like the core strategies for my type is to wait for the invitation. If you've dug into human design even a little bit, you'll hear that projectors are supposed to wait for the invitation. All types are supposed to wait for something, even manifestors. I'll get to that. Or I get to that in my work. But it has to do with what are you responding to? And for projectors, we tend to be um we're good at mastering systems, seeing what needs to happen, seeing the details or how to like fix things or improve things. That can come off very invasive because the projector's aura is very penetrative. We laser focus target, we can look deeply, see deeply into people. Not everybody wants that kind of intimacy, right? And it can be intimidating, overwhelming, like, right? And so that's why we're supposed to wait to be invited, because otherwise it can come off as we're being too much.
Intrusive. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
intrusive.
Too much. Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
And knowing that about myself made me recognize, for one thing, that my mother was a projector. And I was like, oh, that explains so much. So much. And then it also made me look at the way that I would interact with my children of, okay, maybe they don't need this level of intensity from me. Maybe I should dial it back, allow them to be, to express, to figure out, things on their own. And I guess that was also part of my journey into unschooling, had to do with really allowing the kid's natural genius to be, right? One of the things, unschooling as a label, I think can get a lot of it can be foggy. I don't view unschooling as child-led. I think that's actually like a a mistaken path. Maybe
Okay.
it works when they're toddlers, but at some point you want to provide some scaffolding, some guidance, some, something uh, that can be an anchor point for your children. You can't just let them completely, take charge of their own lives when they are relying on their parents to guide them and to at least witness and reflect back, hey, we can do this in a different way, or have you tried this, or
Yeah.
various things, right? And so knowing that about me, that I could have that invasive thing, and then applying it with unschooling of allowing my kids to kind of blossom and be who they are. And then also noticing that my oldest child was a projector too. That was another thing where I was like, hey, maybe ease up on your siblings a little bit. He would want to be directing everybody. And older brother, of course, that's,
Yeah.
normal. But then there's that added piece of he's a projector, and his siblings might find that really, really invasive, overwhelming, too much. And so just knowing that that was his tendency, I was able to not shut it down, but redirect it. Hey, here's a way that you can do this that will be helpful
Yeah.
versus, stop, don't, or whatever. Like, but how can we say yes and make it a yes for everybody or a win for everybody?
Yes. Yeah. And so for each child then, did you have any of your children a similar chart, or most of them pretty different?
So one of the big things in human design is whether or not you have emotional authority. About half the world has emotional authority, and half the world doesn't. And so a lot of the common advice about wait, think it over, sleep on it before you make a decision. This is our decision making strategy, right? About half of us can benefit from waiting to feel our emotional flow. The other half of us, we don't have to do that. We kind of know. But if you're an emotional being raised by non-emotionals or vice versa, you might be getting amazing advice that doesn't fit for you. And so, two of my children are emotional. They need more time, but they also have this like impulsiveness. They think they know, they want to go for it. And knowing that they were emotional helped me to be like, so maybe you can wait before you are too hasty in something. Versus my other children who were not emotional, sometimes they would surprise me with the clarity that they would just, oh, I know what I want. I know this is the way I want to go. This is, I want the blue one or whatever. And they were right. And so just allowing them that space, just that one piece of are they emotional or are they not emotional? And that's a really easy thing to look at in your chart, whatever else is going on. If you have a defined emotional center, which is the solar plexus in human design, then you are an emotional being, which is to say that wait for clarity is a good advice for you. But again, it's like half the population, right? So,
So it's also interesting for me because from my chart, I'm assuming that I don't have that emotional
right,
authority.
you are not an
And
emotional authority.
I often have judged myself for not being, quote, as emotional as other
Mhm.
women, especially. Like,
Yes.
like I can come across like, one person said to me, "You're not very sentimental." I'm like, yeah, that might be true, you know.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and it doesn't mean I can't be sentimental, but I'm not really driven very much by emotions so much. So that's interesting.
Sure. Well, and I'm not emotional authority either. But it's not to say we're not emotional, but emotional people, they tend to create the flow, the dynamic, the change, the emotions that we all feel. For instance, my emotional Manny Gen daughter, manifesting generator, when she's upset, people at work have told this to her. They're like, when you're upset, everybody feels it. Like we all want to do whatever it is to fix what your mood is. So, because she really sets the tone, she has this
Yeah.
big energy. There's lots of elements in her chart that correspond to like a big energy. I've also had people mistake like they've been like, "Oh, she's really tall." And they've met her in person. She's actually the shortest person in our family, but she has a
Wow.
very big presence. And
Yeah.
part of that is she's creating this emotional experience for everyone who is sharing space with her. But folks like me and you with undefined or open emotional centers, we feel it. We can even amplify it. We can match that energy, but then when we leave that person's aura space, we go back to our neutral, more calm, more um,
Yeah.
objective emotional state.
That's why I
And
need
so
my alone time. Yes.
we need our alone time.
Yeah.
Yes. Anyone with the fewer defined centers you have, the more likely you are to need alone time to decompress because we are all interacting with each other's auras and the human design kind of works like a circuit board. That's my best analogy for how this shows up. And so as a reflector, you have a lot of potentially open circuits. As a projector with just two centers defined, I also have a lot of potentially open circuits, but my defined centers, there's a magnetic pull a little bit. So I'm more likely to get hooked by other people's auras, for better or worse, right? Because we're
Yeah.
all conditioning each other, impacting each other. Hopefully it's good. Sometimes it's something to troubleshoot. Um, but as a reflector, that's another thing is that you're less likely to get hooked by other people's energy once you're alone, once you separate yourself physically, you're able to go, oh, right. It's just me.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So with your kids, then you saw which ones have emotional part of their body, a part of their chart defined, right? And those
Yes.
don't, right? And then depending on whether they're a projector, manifestor, can you actually go list what the different types are?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So, as we said, reflectors are that 1% of the population. Projectors are the other non-energy type, and they are about 20% of the population. Then we have together generators and manifesting generators. Those types together, it's about half and half. That's 70% of the population. All of those people have defined sacral centers. More details we don't have to go into. And then about 8 or 9% of the population are what's called manifestors. They have a connection to their throat center, so they have like a powerful voice, and so, but they have an undefined sacral, and they are they have share a lot of things in common with reflectors. It's very interesting. So the manifestors and the reflectors. I've seen many times that there is friendships or long-term relationships between manifestors and reflectors. Not just my son and his best friend, but
Okay.
I've seen that in many times that there's like a similarity there. So manifestors, manifesting generators, generators, projectors, reflectors, and that's
Okay.
all of them.
So once you knew those dynamics about your five children, you could look at all the different ways to make it work among your like your own family group, but then out in the world as well, huh?
Definitely, definitely. For instance, knowing that my reflector child needs some space socially, like he can take on a lot with all that openness and he can maybe amplify it. Maybe he's the life of the party and really, big social energy, but then he's always been pretty good at knowing, oh, I've hit my limit. I'm done. And so because he would just leave. He'd be like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm gonna go inside, not socialize anymore. And so he was very young, and we were like, so here's the polite way to do that. Excuse yourself. And and so he would. Um, and I guess the other practical piece with human design that I really loved, especially when my kids were little, was knowing about the way that the energy that they have affects their bedtime and their cycles during the day. So if you have a child with a defined sacral, that's about 70% of the population, the generators and the manny gens, manifesting generators, they need to be expending their energy. They have a consistent flow of energy. And so they want to be out and doing things and busy. My granddaughter is a generator. Both her parents are projectors. And her parents are the type of people who they need to go to bed before they're tired. So projectors and reflectors, we need to have a conscientious wind down where we're pulling our energy back, being alone, taking time for ourselves to disengage from that sacral energy, that busyness of the generators and manigens in the world. Whereas manigens and generators, if they're burning through their energy during the day, doing things that they love and they find valuable, then they're going to fall into bed and fall asleep in like 3 minutes. And so that's even been a helpful thing, for instance, with my kids as they've gotten older. My generator son has had trouble falling asleep, and he's a generator. Oh, okay. So maybe he is not doing enough of the things that he loves. Because sometimes I think we can assume, oh, there's, depression or apathy or something going on. And so we think that they need to stop doing things. And it's like, no, you need to do more things, but it's the things that you love, right?
Yes. Yes. That makes sense.
And so
What
that,
about
that, yeah.
so so you mentioned for projectors and reflectors, they need to be more conscious about their bedtime routine in terms
Yes.
of winding down. Okay.
And
Yeah,
we
it
will
is.
resist it, but it's good for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, no, not me. No, I never did. I'm
I
like,
am fully
yeah,
aware that it's good for me to go to bed early, and yet I
yeah,
still fight
same
it.
here. Same here. It's like
But
last night
does
I was
that,
so proud of myself because I set this alarm before 10 that I'm supposed to be getting into bed before 10. And I actually was in bed when I went off. I'm like, that never happens. Oh my
there you go. Yeah.
God.
I actually have multiple alarms telling me like get ready for bed, start getting ready for bed because I will just hyper focus and running on borrowed energy, right? Because again, our
Yes.
auras are combining and especially in a big household with lots of children, they're
Yeah.
bouncing off each other's energy. And so my projector and my reflector, my youngest and my oldest, especially we had to kind of create separate space for them to disengage and to wind down and kind of reconnect with their physical body even. And
Yeah.
then they're like, "Oh, right, yeah, I am hungry, tired, thirsty. I should, take care of myself." Because the tendency for these non-sacral beings like you and me is to just get hooked on all that sacral energy and we go it's very much the parable of the tortoise and the hare. The generators and manifesting generators are the tortoise. They have consistency, sometimes even can go fast, but the non-energy types, we tend to go super duper fast. And then we realize we're running on borrowed energy and we tend to need a long nap or something.
That makes sense. Yeah. And now I'm really curious about putting in my own kids' charts because my older son, the one who's now and his residency as a doctor, he's definitely more like steady. He studied, he got straight A's in medical school. He did whatever he needed to do. He just consistently can do things. I'm like,
Mhm.
how does he do that?
Probably he has a defined sacral.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And my other son and I, not so much. I mean, my younger son's gotten more consistent because now he's out doing a job and everything. But it is funny how, as you describe these things, it makes me much more curious to check out my brothers, my sisters, my kids, or people that I'm close to see
Right.
like how it matches what I've experienced about them.
Well, and I should have started with this point actually, is that up to about age 7, because we're familiar with like the 7-year cell cycle and growth cycle, right? Up to about age 7, a child's design is still very fluid and flexible. And so I'm not usually like if someone comes to me and they're like, "Oh, I'm having trouble with my 5-year-old." I'm saying, "Okay, well, let's look at your design as the parent because that's going to give us a lot more information." Basic things like, "Oh, my child's a generator, my child's a reflector, my child's emotional, my child's non-emotional." That can be helpful, but digging into the chart deeper when they're young is really just let's look at what's going on with you, the parent.
Yeah,
That's going to
it
give
makes
you
sense.
more.
It makes sense.
And another fun aside is that we often see themes in our child's chart that mirror things from our parents' charts. And so it's like we're getting the life lessons from both directions.
Oh, really?
Because it's
Hmm.
like we inherit our design a little bit from our grandparents. And it's not a direct correlation, but you might see certain elements or certain themes. For instance, my daughter, who is a generator, even though she's a generator, she has an open throat and she has particular things in the way that her throat is defined that match my mom's chart.
Hmm.
And it gives me insight into how and why my mom chose to use her voice and to speak up and also to st remain silent at certain times because I see these patterns in my daughter as well as she's in early adulthood now, but it's like, oh, that's so sometimes you'll see these like little things that will remind you of your parents or perhaps even, your siblings. And
Well,
then
can you do a chart not knowing somebody's birth time? Because my mother's already passed away. My dad is in his 90s. I don't know that he'll remember. He might remember whether he was born in the morning or the evening, but can you put
Mhm.
in a birth date and just put in 12 noon and have it be somewhat accurate or no?
Yes and no. It
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah. I knew you were
depends.
going to say that.
Right. Well, what you can do is look at a few different times over the course of a 24-hour day and see if it changes significantly, because sometimes it will.
Okay.
Sometimes it's quite, the profile changes, the type changes, like define something, it'll change a lot, or it might change in very subtle ways. Maybe just like one or two little gates change. So
Yeah.
my husband does not know his birth time. We cannot find the data. It's a big mystery.
Yeah.
And so what I've done is basically it's called a reconciliation, where somebody who's skilled in human design and the little details and elements of your chart will go through and look at all the possible times. And if there is a big change or a small change, then you can kind of work with what you know about the person to kind of narrow it down. Sometimes it's helpful if they say, "Oh, like for instance, my father, uh, one of the world's biggest skeptics, and he happened to notice, what are you doing there? Do mine, do mine." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've done yours. It's like this and this." And it never, it was sort of sounded like him, sort of sound, But he looked over my shoulder and he's like, "I wasn't born then. I was born like 30 minutes later." And I was like, "Okay, I'll change it." And it changed the chart, and it was mind-blowingly exactly accurate.
Wow.
30 minutes difference.
Yeah.
And it changed these elements in just this way where I'm like, of course, reading about it and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's exactly my dad."
Whether your dad being a skeptic, once he saw the final results, did anything make sense to him about it?
He huffed and puffed about it a little bit. I talked with him about, well, what's this mean? What's that mean? And I just kind of told him some basic things and he was like, "Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah." So he
But
was
then we know you resisted it when you found out about yours too. So,
right. Well,
right.
and it's funny because the particular design of my father, one of the things that's written about it is that they are the world's biggest skeptics. They're not going to be interested in spiritual things. They're very much here for the material plane, the 3D world. So don't bother them with mysticism. That's not what they're here for.
I
And
wonder if
so
that's how my oldest son will come out, but it's
it's
hard to know.
interesting, right? It's
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 hard to
so
know how much, unless you look at somebody's chart, it's hard to know how much is programming of this reality and how much is
yes.
you know, what the human design piece. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's like it's always that yin yang, that entanglement, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like one, I mean, if we're living in a quantum universe and time goes forwards and backwards, it can be both, right? Like a lot of my work in birth work had to do with like the spiritual and mystical experience of pregnancy. And I did work with Neil and Elizabeth Carmen, the folks who wrote about pre-birth and interlife memories and communication. And so much of that research that they've done, spans 55 years or something of research, talks about how we choose our birth time and we choose our parents. And like so many of these elements are a conscious choice that we, of course, don't remember because we've gone through the veil of forgetfulness and chose
Well, I'm
that.
curious. The thing that comes up for me around that is both of my kids, I waited till they came naturally. But these days, especially talking to my nephew, because my youngest sister's son has two kids, and he was talking about how much they push you now to come in at a particular date, and that's
Yeah.
when they're going to have your baby be born, whether you like it or not, right? And so the soul involved knows that that's going to be part of the deal, or what do you
I
think?
believe so. I believe it's a co-creation. Yeah. I think that um even in cases where there is some sort of emergency situation or something, there's always a way to kind of, communicate and hold that space of, hey, we're in it together and here's what's happening and what do you think? And I do believe that, children are aware. For instance, I mean, we have a good friend of ours that she knew that she was going in for a scheduled cesarean, and that was the kind of birth that she knew was going on. And she talked to her little one before they came and said, so this is what's going on, and how do you feel about that? And she was open to receiving whatever kind of feedback that she might get, whether that would be from dreams or feeling, physical feelings in her body, however her intuition wants to communicate with her. And just being open to, so this is what we're planning, and then listening, really deeply listening and connecting and being open to hearing if that is a resonant match or not. And it seemed like it was, and everything went beautifully. It was one of the most lovely, amazing surgical births I've ever been to. So,
Yeah, right.
you
Right.
know,
I mean, I certainly learned from my own experience, because my kid's dad was clear that there's no way he's going to let me have a child outside of the hospital, right? So I knew that was part of the plan, right? And my first son, it took 40 hours from beginning of contractions to when he came out, and there's so many things that I planned that didn't go the way that I
yes,
desired, but that was the way that it came out in the end. So you just have to trust that that's just part of the process. Um,
exactly.
and let go of trying to control it to some degree. But with human design, there's a lot that you can learn about your relationship to yourself, your relationship to others, in the case of reflectors and probably some other designs too, like your relationship with your environment and the moon cycle. Um, what are some other things, like as you know, I almost didn't have the show today because my this side of my face reacted with a rash 2 days ago that I'm still asking about, like what was the causal piece, but my skin tends to be sensitive, and every now and then it's just like, plump, we're gonna pop out with a rash, right? Do you have some more sense from studying human design, like how to tap into your body awareness more as well?
Yes. So this is one of the things that so human design is called a quantum system. The official is like it's a quantum human design chart because it's calculated not just with your birth date, but also with a date 88 days prior, which is your design date. Again, it's a channeled system, and asking why doesn't really go far. This is just the way that this information came through.
Yes.
Our birthday, and then another day, 88 days prior. So basically, what we have are two charts within our chart. So we have our conscious mind, our personality, our soul, if you will, and our design, which is our physical body elementals, astrology, basically. It's the chart of our body and the chart of our soul as a two-part being. I love this part, especially because it resonates with all of the work that I have explored via Anelia Ben's teachings, which really resonate with me. I've followed her since 2011 or something. And and more and more, I love being able to draw these parallels. And so the idea that we have a physical body that is conscious and intelligent and aware as it's almost like a tool of technology that we inhabit, right? That we are incarnated into. So we have our consciousness, which is like a soul, a spirit, and then we have our physical body, which also has its own innate intelligence, lineage, wisdom. And in human design, there are 7 different types of authority, and your authority in human design, as this is the part where I was saying half of us are emotional, half of us are other things, not
Yes.
emotional, right? So there's about 6 other things. Different systems talk about it in different ways, but effectively, 7 different authorities. Authority is how we are wired to make good decisions, and it's our physical body that's wired this way. So it has to do with our physicality. There is no authority of the mind in human design because the mind is a problem solver, a fact filing system. It does a lot of amazing things for us. But when it comes to making decisions about our heart and our gut, our mind is going to lead us astray almost always. Leaning on logic to make decisions is it's the wrong way to do it according to human design. And my life experiences in my 44 plus years so far have taught me that is absolutely true because I tried it the other way. I tried for a long time to be extremely, extremely logical
Yeah.
and not emotional and also not any of the other possible ways of making decisions. Only logic. And boy, you got to walk pretty far down the wrong path. It's still okay to turn around. So, and so human design, looking at your authority is a brilliant way to basically connect with your physical body's innate intuitive sense that will lead you to make good decisions, to make decisions that feel aligned with your heart and your gut feeling, gut awareness. So gut feeling and gut awareness tends to be a sacral response. We also have an ego or a will center. Some people have will-based authority. Then there's splenic, which is very in the moment right now. These are the people who really are done dirty by the advice of sleep on it, wait a while. They know immediately what's true for them. They feel it in their physical body, and being told to wait, 3 days or something to make a decision about something that they know already, that's really hard for them. And that's about 10% of the population. So it's fun to see if you have splenic authority, if that, for instance, a splenic authority person with emotional parents. Those parents, their default setting is going to be because a lot of times we come to this wisdom, right? We don't necessarily need human design to tell us, right? A lot of us just through living, we are already living a lot of aspects of our design. I think you said that as well, Kathleen, right? You're
Yeah.
naturally are living in alignment with your design just by virtue of bumping around and figuring out life as we do. But a child who is wired significantly differently from their parents, especially in that decision-making authority piece, they might end up kind of feeling like something's wrong with them if the advice that they're getting from their parents doesn't really resonate with them or doesn't work for them. And so, um, even if our kids are, under the age of 7, one of those basic pieces to look at is like, okay, what's their type? What's their authority? Um, and just to know, for instance, I don't push my emotional authority kids to make quick decisions. I also don't push my reflector to make quick decisions. He takes perhaps longer than anyone because he's waiting for that whole lunar cycle to feel out all the possibilities. And just knowing that that was his type, like for instance, when they were little and they're all playing games, hurry up and pick, hurry up. And I would say, give him some space, give him some time. And so we would learn, for instance, if we're ordering at a menu, reflector goes last. And it's little things like that can help connect. But yeah, just that piece alone of acknowledging our physical body as its own entity and knowing that that is where our true decision-making power lies has been really, really helpful for me with human design. So that's a part that I talk about. I don't know anybody else who's talking about human design in that way with our body elemental and our conscious mind, kind of as separate things. So it's like I'll deconstruct your chart and then say, okay, well, your body elemental is like this. And when we bring it together, this is your whole chart, your quantum chart. So,
So
um,
if I looked at, I mean, I know it's not like an easy answer thing, but if I looked at, okay, I'm not sure exactly what is making my face be inflamed like this,
mm,
but and I'll spend some more time with it and I'll ask questions of my body. But as a reflector, might it take a whole month before I actually come around to knowing what actually was going on today? Or, I mean, like when you talked about ordering from the menu, I usually need some time to do that, like you described. There's certain things you can't wait 30 days for, well, not 30,
Right.
29, whatever.
Highly impractical.
Right. So, is like, how do you physically use that when it comes to communicating with things about your body? Like in whether you look at it from a reflector point of view or your human design, how do you then make sense of that?
Well, I think also that, for instance, if you were making a big decision like, should I move to another country?
Yeah,
I would definitely be looking at the lunar cycle and like
right, right.
charting, maybe
Yeah,
journaling just to see where you're at day to day. But with something like asking for clarity with your, with something going on with your physical body, a lot of times, I'm sure we both know this as students of Anelia Benz, a lot of times our bodies are communicating with us. And so something like this that shows up, it's good to look at what response comes up in us, like what's our conscious mind saying, and
yeah,
then where is that coming from, right? So a few years ago, I was dealing with some weird symptoms in my body. It turned out that I was living in a moldy house, but um, my reaction to these symptoms was not curiosity at first. It was impatience. It was a little bit of anger and just like, oh, I want this go away. I want this fix. And just kind of realizing like, oh, wait, I don't have to do that. And I can view my body as an ally who is trying to communicate something with me and really breaking up myself into these two separate entities as like, okay, there's me and then there's my body, and I want to be, kind and loving and showing up for her in a way where I can listen and hear more. And so, and it won't necessarily take 30 days because again, you as a reflector, you are all the types and
yes, it's
the
true.
types. And
True.
so perhaps
Well,
in a
it's
certain
funny.
transit, you'll get a
It's
flash of
funny.
clarity.
I'm just gonna say it's funny because I've been dealing with mold too, because when
Uh,
I was gone over the summer, I didn't have my air conditioning on the whole time I was gone, and I came home to kind of like a white mold all
oh
over
no.
any place, still. But yeah, when I try to go into like cognitively figuring out, it'd be like, why is it just this side of my face, and why blah 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 blah, right? Instead of being like you said, I know how to kind of check in with my body and go
Of course.
deeper. But if there was something that I should be looking at as a reflector differently, is more what I was asking. But I think
Ah,
because, like you said, as a reflector, I can be any type. It's more kind of tracking where I'm at right now. It sounds like,
exactly.
yeah,
So, yeah, I might like if I wanted to get like for instance mental clarity around it, I would look at like where in my chart are, if anywhere for you, are those mental transits activating, or the spleen, for instance. The spleen is our center of our immune system, and it's also survival, right? And so maybe there is a transit where your spleen, which I know offhand that your spleen has some activations
yeah,
that are strong to do with your body, and so maybe looking through where is the next transit where I'm going to get that splenic definition, where it connects perhaps to the throat, where you'll be able to express it, perhaps to the sacral center, where you'll be able to like have a physical release, right? Or maybe to the root, where there will be a sense of timing that shows up. And so it will be in these different ways of what that will look like. But
okay, makes sense. Yeah,
yeah.
that makes sense. So, in terms of human design and being a parent, and also being, as you described, knowing about your own parents. So it's not just being a parent to kids, but it's also knowing other people in your family. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you feel like you could share with people today before we get to describing how people can find you and your website and all of that?
All right, let me think about that. Hmm. I think, and I mean, maybe this is, me, uh, subjective, but for me, a lot of it comes back to we are better at showing up in our relationships, whether it's with our partners, our children, our parents, our friends, if we know ourself deeply. And so doing that work and really looking at our own chart and our own things that we judge about ourselves through this lens of like radical self-compassion and tenderness. And because once we can really accept even the things that like we can look at our past self and go, what was she thinking? But also to have, compassion for that version of us. I think that that is the jumping off point from which we are able to see the highest potential of our children and even our parents and what's possible for us in that lineage and that flow of time. Um, and I would also say, uh, if it doesn't resonate with you for whatever reason, like for instance, I'll have people, this is perhaps especially a projector thing. Um, well, what does human design say about my finances? Or what does human design say about, am I supposed to be with this person or not? And they really want to hinge their life on, well, I'm a projector, so, or I'm a manigen, so. And if it's not working for your life, throw it out. Like it doesn't matter in the end of the day. If if you're justifying having a terrible experience in
Yeah.
whatever, like don't use it to justify like, well, it's, I can't help it. I'm a projector, and so I'm not here to do, like there's a phrase in classic human design, like traditional human design. I'm a little untraditional. Um, in traditional human design, they say that projectors are not here to work in the typical sense. And it's like, well, yes. And,
I might need to have some money.
right. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, whatever you read about human design, if you feel it limiting your perspective in whatever way, if you feel like it's narrowing or
Right.
narrowing your focus about what's possible for you, for your child, for your partner, for your parents, maybe it's time to reframe that because I think so often, and that's a feedback I get from a lot of people is like, oh, you pointed out these things that I knew about myself, but you told me them in a totally different light. And now I can have more compassion for myself. And I think
Yeah.
that's always going to result in better and improved and more beautiful connections with those we love. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And that aspect of not using it as a way to not be empowered, still choosing not to like become a victim or I guess an aggressor with your chart and use it
exactly.
as a way to not be empowered. Instead, like, so for instance, for me as a reflector, I could gather more information if I would start journaling and kind of tracking how things are at different times of the month since that lunar cycle makes a difference for me. But if it means that I'm turning it against myself in some way, it doesn't make sense. And especially when you're a parent, or like in my case, I'm around children because of being a teacher,
Yeah,
always looking for how to, like you said, reframe it into something that is instead of making it a wrongness, can we make it a strongness, of
exactly.
who you are? Yeah.
Beautiful way to say it.
Yes.
And yeah, that's the thing is like a lot of the traditional, maybe this is why it took me so long to bother like really formalizing my training in human design because so much of the traditional original human design stuff feels like dogma. And
Yeah.
I'm not into dogma of
Yeah.
any sort.
Right.
And I'm always looking for, can this be a tool of self-empowerment? Can we use this to move forward in some way like to look at to have acceptance of where we are and not make excuses for like low frequency behaviors and choices and habits, right?
Yeah.
For
Yep. I'm
instance,
a reflector, whatever.
I have seen this out in the world.
Yeah,
And
no, I'm sure you
also,
have like
yeah,
or even people like people mean this in different ways, but when people are like, I'm going to speak my truth about who I am and bubble in a way that's just self-righteous instead of actually self-empowering and useful
exactly.
in terms of communicating to others.
Exactly, exactly. Anything that I think pigeonholes you in some way, like take it if it's useful and if it's something that you're using as like a crutch or a prop, like maybe it's time to dig a little deeper and let go of some of that. Um, for instance, manifestors in human design, one of the first things they get told is that they're not self, like their low frequency behavior is anger. And okay, they're angry people. Like what are they supposed to do with that, right?
Yeah.
It can be harsh. And it also has to do with not that they're angry, but maybe other people are angry at them. And maybe they feel, the weight of that. And so just that little kind of reframe about yes, and
Yeah.
can give it a totally different perspective. And I've met people who, for whatever reason, they're just like, it doesn't flow for them. And so I fully invite them to, find what does work, right? For me,
Right.
this communicates very deeply and on so many levels. And I think it's like astrology too. I used to get the star scrolls when I was a child, those little things in the gas station where you would unroll
Yeah.
your horoscope for the month. I was probably 6 years old and delighted with these things. And the people in my world when I was 6 utterly dismissed astrology, right? I've mentioned about my dad, how he's.
Yeah.
And yet, with astrology too, the more I learned, the more detailed I got, the more it shocked me at how resonant it is. But if you stay surface level, if you only stay at the level of like, okay, I'm a Capricorn or okay, I'm a projector,
Right.
some of it might be helpful and some of it is like, yeah, not quite it. But the deeper you go, if you choose, if you feel called to, you might be very surprised at what shows up.
Yes, yes. I mean, even or just seeing once you find out your chart where it overlaps with other things you've learned. Because when
Yes.
I in training in access consciousness, when they taught me this whole idea for all of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions, be willing to say, who does that belong to, or is that mine? And as a reflector, that's especially important, right? Because if I'm like taking on other people's stuff all the time, because that's part of being open the way I am,
Yes.
and then be like, wait, like at my family reunion this year, I got angrier than I ever did. And my sister,
Oh.
Maureen, who she's like, you're usually so zen. I'm like, I think this time more than any, because we're like managing my dad in a different way too. I
Mm,
just feel like I was taking on everybody's anger about certain dynamics,
yes.
right? But
Yes.
I forgot to ask that until later, like instead of just being like, "Oh my gosh!" And so I
Yeah.
was using the kind of stress processing exercise that we know from Amelia Benz, and it helped a lot. But that aspect of knowing what's yours and what's not yours, it can be so helpful.
Right.
So,
Especially for a reflector.
oh yeah, yeah, it's good to know. So, what's the best way for people to connect with you? Is it through your website? And if so, can you tell people? I'll also put it below the YouTube channel, but do you want to tell people how they can connect with you?
Okay, so well, first you might have noticed my little handle down there is holographic self. That's me on Instagram. And I say I have a website. It's Human Design Self. And you can also find me on Substack at Self Awakening. So I actually have 250 odd articles on my Substack. I've been blogging for over 10 years. I have a lot of human design content. I have some birth content, some health content, some unschooling content, quite a lot of that as I've um, been in some format homeschooling, unschooling for 22 years. Yeah, something
Yeah.
like that. So
Yeah.
so Substack, yeah. Self-Awakening at Substack. You can find me there and read all my musings and see if you resonate. So
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure talking about this topic with you and being able to share it with others. So thanks
Thank
so much for coming on to the Grown Up Conscious Show. And if there's other topics you want to talk about in the future, let me know.
All right. I appreciate it. Thank you.
But that's it for today. So bye, everyone.